Hello and welcome to Marineford TCG. Today we're going to be going over everything that you need to know about the pre-release tournament for OP09 / second anniversary. So they're doing it a little bit differently from your typical pre-release. Instead of just calling it pre-release for set 9, they're calling it the second anniversary. We had one of these for set 5 back about a year ago now. It's pretty cool. So what we've got today, we've got the event info. I'm going to go over everything you need to know about the events, participation, how it works, what you need to do to sign up. We're going to go over some general tips for these pre-release events, and then I've highlighted some of the top techs that I've pulled out of 09 I think are potentially underexplored cards, or cards that you should consider including in your pre-release deck. So, when we get started, we've got, this is the event info, right, it runs from the 6th of December to the 27th at Bandai stores and LGSs. I don't know what date your LGS is going to be doing it, you got to ask them. You can also check out the Bandai app, most of the events are up, but I can't guarantee they're all up yet. Check out your LGS, give them a call, ask when it's happening. I imagine most of them will be, potentially a lot of them on December 6th or the weekend immediately following, because the set comes out 1 week later, and a lot of these stores are going to want to do these as pre-release events, because that attracts more customers, right? They can run them as either constructed or sealed. I'm a big advocate for sealed for these. We play constructed every week, right? Whether you're a locals, a regionals, or anything in between, you're playing constructed. I prefer sealed for these events, just to make it a bit different. And the latter half of this guide that's going over cards and such is going to be based on sealed. You don't need a guide on constructed. You can check out any other video on set 9 or 8.5 or whatever you want to play. For participating, you're going to get this King Luffy promo. They've given these out a few times before at various different events. But if you haven't got one yet, you're going to get one now. It's not very good, but, you know, it's fun. It's a pretty cool promo. I'm really hoping it's the holo version. I do believe there's a holo and a non-holo version of this. We're also getting this Garp Don, which is pretty cool. And this is the only time this is being given out, I believe. So this might fetch a couple bucks. I don't think we've had Garp on a Don before. So that's pretty cool. This scene from the Goa Kingdom, when he's training Luffy, before he gives him to Dan. And instead of the normal pre-release cards that you're going to get with a pre-release stamp, you're going to get ones. This is what they did a year ago at the first anniversary, right? So this Nico Romans from set 5. And you can see here, it just says first anniversary. A bit of a crappy stamp, I'm not going to lie. But people like these a lot more than the pre-release ones. They go for quite a lot higher values, especially the popular characters. You know, your Robin, your Nami, and so on. I'm hoping that they have this stamp that you can see here on the Don. This is the same stamp that's on the winner cards. So I'm really hoping they do this instead of this. Because this looks way cooler. I like this with the skull and crossbones. Pretty cool. If you win, you're in for a big payday. Look at these. These are awesome. These are alt-art leaders of these Starter Deck 13 leaders. You got the Black Killer Luffy, the Red Yellow Sabo, and the Blue Yellow Ace. These look sick. Totally different from all the other alt-arts of them we've had so far. With the regular ones, with the black and white ones that were in the little pack that you got in the theme deck. And we've had the sort of more black embossed ones that came in the leader file, or whatever it was called, that was sold at the Bandai Card Fests. But these are totally different. New designs. We've seen these in Japan, of course. These look awesome, and they all have this stamp here that you can see I spoke about on the Garp Don. Second anniversary. I really like these. I really want the Luffy. The Luffy looks sick. This Ace is terrible, but the Luffy leader's really good. And I imagine if you're lucky enough to win a set of these, they're going to be worth a good bit of money, I reckon. And like I say, the winner of the tournament gets all 3 of these. You get all 3. No gambling, which is insane. So before we start talking about what to do with your deck, we need to cover what sealed is quickly. So what it is you're going to go to your LGS, you're going to open 6 boosters, and you're going to build a 40 card deck. So note that is 10 less than standard One Piece. No 50 cards, just 40. We don't get that many cards, so you got to keep it simple. There are no color restrictions. So if you use the red Luffy leader from Starter Deck 1, you can use any color of cards. You're not locked to red cards. This format basically wouldn't work if we had color restrictions. There are also no card count restrictions, so if you're lucky enough to pull 5 copies of the Blackbeard blocker, for example, you can include them all. Normally, you can only play 4 in a deck, but in sealed, just play with what you pull. And one more thing is the rest of your pulls are your sideboard. So you can't sideboard cards in during a game, obviously, but after your round 1, say you win your round, but you find a couple cards that didn't work how you thought they would, you can swap them out with something else from your sideboard, which is pretty cool. It gives people a bit more flexibility in the building of their decks. Any other restrictions do apply, so for example, the Don Quixote Doflamingo leader that plays out Warlords, he can still only play out 4-cost Warlords, he can't play out anything else. But it's just the colour restrictions are gone and the card count restrictions are gone. Those are the main ones. So now we're going to dive into Sealed. What you need to show up with, you need to show up with sleeves, generally, unless you want to play unsleeved. If you want to play unsleeved, you're a heathen, I don't want to know you. You need to show up with 10 Don, of course, and you need to show up with a leader. So you can use leaders that you pull in the set or that you've acquired from elsewhere. So these are the sort of the old guard of leaders that people have tried and have been tested in the past. Useless Captain Kid from Starter Deck 2 is a classic. You just get to attack twice with him. It's pretty good. In general, in these events, you want leaders with very generic effects. So something like a Doflamingo leader, whilst he's really good in constructed, is completely useless in sealed, because the vast majority of your cards are not going to be 4-cost Warlords, right? So you really want a generic effect, and that's why Kid's really good, because it doesn't matter if you've got no characters, because he can attack twice, which is sick. We've got Bonnie here. This is a bit of a newer pick from set 7, but Bonnie's great, just such a defensive leader, and especially if you pull cards that are more top-end heavy, Bonnie can be really valuable, just buying you that one fewer hit per turn. I can't overstate how nuts that is in a pre-release format. Your opponent's got 2 dudes, they can only hit you twice instead of 3 times, which is really impactful. Yamato was incredibly popular in set 6, has fallen off a little bit now, but still a really good leader. Double attack in pre-release is great, because you don't have many 2Ks, and this extra effect is also just pretty good. This is a really high tempo aggro deck. If you want your games to be over fast, you could consider Yamato. I personally don't like Yamato because I think it makes the game very boring. It turns into, did you draw a blocker? And if they drew a blocker, you probably lose. If they didn't draw a blocker, you probably win. It's not very interactive, I'm not going to lie. So whilst I can't recommend playing Yamato from a fun factor, if you just want your games to be quick, give her a go. She's not bad. Katakuri is another one. He's not as good, but 7k swing for 1 Don, I mean, it's pretty good, right? And you gain that bit of knowledge on your life. You can potentially control your draws a little bit. It's fine. Without all the triggers, though, and the Tenko's Big Mum, he is a lot weaker. So, of the new leaders, I think Buggy is obviously garbage, because you need cross-skill cards. Blackbeard, also obviously garbage, because half the cards in the set aren't going to work with him. Same with Lim, I don't want to have my characters come in rested, especially when I'm not going to pull that many Odyssey characters. Black Purple Luffy is just too specific. If you pull a load of cards that do Don -2, maybe, but even then, I don't think it's very good. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with Shanks and Nico Robin. I think Shanks is going to be the better of the two. 5 Life Leader is definitely superior in pre-release. And just that -1000, it's similar to Bonnie, right? I don't think it's as good as Bonnie, but it doesn't require a Don, so I think there's something to be said. And if you get any cards like Lucky Roo that are leader locked, you can then use those, and they're pretty nuts cards. So I think there's something to be said for Shanks. I think it's just a sort of a different version of Bonnie, probably weaker overall, but you know, he's there, he's not bad. Robin, I'm interested in. Banish seems like it would be really good in pre-release, because it's all a resource game, right, pre-release. Obviously, if you're trying to deal with your opponent's board, you basically don't have a leader effect. This, when attacking, is inconsistent, especially in pre-release, where you don't know how many trigger cards you're going to get. And trashing a card when you're already at 4 life resources is pretty bad in a format like that. I think Banish could be pretty cool. I'm interested to see if people have success with Robin. I think there's something there. So there's 2 common 2Ks. There is Nico Olvia and there's Beppo. If you're playing with Rainbow Luffy, Nico Olvia is actually pretty good. It's a 1 Don 3k buff. Beppo's pretty bad, whatever you're playing. And Nico Olvia also has a good trigger if you're playing Rainbow Luffy. But these are both common, so you'll probably get at least 1 of each, possibly more than 1. These are the uncommon 2Ks. There's a lot of them. Kuma's a really nice one because it's just got good stats. Hongo's good if you're playing Rainbow Luffy. Kabaji's not great. Neither is Moji. Although if you get a Reachy blocker, Moji has a little bit of value. Wire is great in Rainbow Luffy, but nothing much else. Lime Juice is probably one of the best 2Ks in the format. Just shutting down those chump blockers. We'll go over the blockers in a minute. And anything with 4,000 power or less, you can effectively nullify with Lime Juice, which is pretty good. Ace is very bang average. He can rest something, but his stat line's pretty good. This Nami's pretty horrible, but it's a 2K. Same with Stronger. And Shiryu, you can play it out if you're really struggling, but it's not great. The main ones here that you're going to probably want to put on the board is Kuma, Ace, Wire if you're in Rainbow Luffy format, and then maybe these guys if you really want to. Lime Juice comes down to clean out a game. But like I say, you're going to include all of them. If you get one of each, you're laughing. You're not going to. You might get... These are uncommons, right? So you tend to get 1 to 2 in a box. So you might get 4 here if you've got average luck. And these 2 are rares. You're probably not going to see these, but if you do, you can put them in. You might be a little bit disappointed that your rares aren't actually attackers. But, 2Ks are fine. Both of these are pretty useless. But, they're 2Ks. Next up, we're going to cover vanillas. You're also going to be putting every single vanilla you pull in your deck. There's a pretty clear favoritism for 4/6 vanillas in this set, which is pretty interesting. You've got 6 of these. They're all commons. You're going to get a few of each of these, probably. Which is something that is worth noting, because an abundance of 4/6 vanillas is going to make 2Ks even more valuable, right? Because your typical leader is 5k power. And if people are playing a lot of these, pretty good. It also might make going second a lot more valuable in this set, because you can play out these dudes on 4 fairly reliably. Especially if you're getting sort of 1 of each of these. That's like 6 4/6 vanillas. That's pretty good. There is 1 3/5 vanilla. He's not so good because your opponent's leader can't swing into him for free. It's Pinkbeard. He's here. Got 2 5/7s, Mr. 1 and Gabu. These are quality as well. 7k is a really nice stat line. Really hard for your opponent to interact with 7ks. And then there's this big Jinbei over here. He's fine. You'll probably include him. Like I say, if this is your first pre-release, once you open your packs, you'll sort of get what I mean. There's a lot of cards that you look at and you're like obviously can't include this. Any searcher, pretty much, is garbage. A lot of the events are garbage. Stages are pretty garbage. Sometimes they can be interesting if you're playing Rainbow Luffy. But outside of that, stage is pretty useless. And a lot of the, just a lot of the little tech cards just aren't very good. Any character that's smaller than a 3/5, other than 2Ks and blockers, tends to be pretty bad. Yeah, you'll get more of a grasp of it once you open your packs, but don't underestimate the vanillas. They're really good cards in this format. And on this page, I've got what I like to call Vanillish. Here he is over here, is Vanillish. So these are characters with vanilla stat lines, but no counter, because they have an effect. Don't get fooled by this Gene Bart. This is a bug on the sim. Not sure why they're using this image. I did check the Japanese one. This definitely doesn't have counter. For these cards, you're probably going to include most of these. There's quite a lot of these are 3/5s. I think Lim is a really good one, because you're going to get quite a few Odyssey cards naturally, I think. So if you end up including these, this can just get you a 1k. And the end of your turn effect is relevant. If you can get... Obviously, Lim's not going to come in rested. But if you can build like a decent board, Lim standing herself up is pretty nice. This Marco is fine. You're probably not getting carried by an effect, but... on the off chance you do, he's got that. This kid, I need to see the official English of. If this is a mandatory take your life, this is pretty horrible. Maybe in Rainbow Luffy. And if this is mandatory, don't play this. But until I see an official English image, I'm going to put this here because I'm not sure if this is mandatory or not. This Zoro is great. This is a 3/5 that says Restandard Don. It's fine. Obviously in Black Purple Luffy you get bananas value out of this. But even in this format, it's just a 3/5 that stands up a Don, which is pretty cool. 2/5. I'm not going to sniff at that. Jaguar D Soul, 3/5 blocker. What's not to love? Great stat line. Blocker's always good. And if you're playing Rainbow Luffy format, you got trigger play, which is pretty cool. Gene Bar is the only 4/6 that's not a vanilla. He doesn't have counter. Again, don't get fooled by this image. And on play, if your opponent's been doing some ramping or you've been doing some Don minus, you can KO 3. Effect's not great, but, you know, it's a 4-6. If you get enough vanillas, though, you might choose to cut Gene Bar in favour of something else, because you'll probably have a good play on the 4 Don turn, specifically. You've got these 3 big dudes, you're probably not going to pull these. Obviously, these 2 SRs and natural inclusions. Blackbeard, even though you don't get the effect, a 10-12 blocker is just ridiculous. Such a good card. And this Shanks is obviously insane in a pre-release format, in a sealed format. Your opponent's playing with like a bunch of crappy characters, and you just minus them all down by 1 and get rush. Ridiculous. This Buggy, I don't think you would include, because you're never meeting this condition, right? You're just never meeting this in sealed. But he's here, he is a 10-12, but I would avoid this Buggy probably. If you're lucky enough to get Roger, you're obviously going to include it. The card's nuts. 10-13 rush. This effect, even if this never activates ever, 10-13 rush is just good, especially in sealed. Blockers. We've got 3 chump blockers. They're all commons. Vasco Shot, Robin, and Ricci. They're all the same. Ricci has slight upside because you can search for him with... Which one is it? Is it Moji? They're 2k. Vasco Shot and Nico Robin are both just blockers. This Robin art's sick though. I really like this. Saul, Frankie, and Lucky Root are your 5k blockers. They're fine. Especially in Rainbow Luffy format. Lucky Roo is insane. And if you pull like a couple Lucky Roos, that could be a reasonable indication to try out Shanks leader. Jaguar D Soul is great, 3-5 blocker. We went over that before. Frankie, once you're at 10, this Don -2 doesn't really matter. You're probably not playing Black Purple Luffy, even if you get multiple Frankies, because that leader just... It doesn't seem very good in a sealed format. But yeah, I mean, a blocker that cycles a card is great. It's great. 6k blockers. First up, you've got Katarina Devon. This is only usable in Rainbow Luffy format. But in Rainbow Luffy format, I think this card is actually sick. Getting to choose between being a blocker, banish, or double attack is awesome. So you can play her down, activate it, choose blocker. You've got a 5-6 blocker. That's decent. And then, presuming she survives, on the next turn, you can choose a double attack or banish to present an offensive threat, which is sick. I think this card's genuinely quite good if you're playing Rainbow Luffy. Obviously, if you're not, this effect is leader locked, so it is something to consider. Koala, the on-play's not great, but you could, if you get enough Revolutionary Army characters, you could use the on-play. But it's just a 6-6 blocker. 6k blockers are no joke. Your opponent does any 5k swings, you just block. And this can all, even in with the 6k vanillas, right? You can just counter 1k, which is always relevant, because there's a lot more 1ks in your deck than 2ks, especially in sealed. But yeah, this one's not too crazy. Not having counter is a bit of a bummer for Koala. I think she's going to be better in constructed than sealed, but probably still worth including if you get her. Chopper is pretty nice. He's a 5-6. End of your turn, you can return 1, stand him up, and then he gains blocker. So you can attack this guy, and he gets blocker. Great, really good. Don -1 doesn't matter once you get to sort of 8, 9, 10 Don, because you just draw it again at the start of your next turn. So I think this is a really good one. And the same for Doflamingo, it's pretty similar. At the end of your turn, if you have 2 more rested dudes, you stand him up. It's not a million miles away from Chopper, right? It's a blocker you can attack with, and then he stands himself back up. Rayleigh's cool. Your opponent's probably going to have 2 or more characters with an original power of 5,000 or more for most of the game after the first couple turns. And draw 2, trash 1 is just good, right? It's just a good card. It's Queen. We know how good Queen is. These are 4k blockers. They're sort of... These are some of the weaker ones. They're sort of in this in-between step between 2-cost cheap chump blockers and blockers they actually have to invest in. This Heat, the on-play is terrible, but this is just a blocker. Karasu is just a blocker, but in Rainbow Luffy format, you can sometimes get him as a trigger. Rosinante is probably the best of the bunch. When your opponent attacks, you can stand him up. So if you want to attack with this, put a Don on him, swing 5, you can. I don't think any of these are great, but you might well include them. Just depends what you pull. Mihawk and Blackbeard. We've already gone over Blackbeard. Mihawk is a 6-7 blocker that draws 2 and trashes 1. Card's really good. 7k blockers are nuts. We've seen how many 6k vanillas are in this set. Getting a free block on those is great. This is probably one of the best SRs you can pull in the set. But yeah, this is just does everything. Draws cards, cycles cards, big blocker, great stat line. You can attack with him. 7 on 5. Yeah, enough said. Events. So, like I said at the start, a lot of events are a bit mid in this format. I've sort of separated these into two piles, right? These are events that are really good if you're playing Rainbow Luffy. Gum Gum Quattro Jet Cross Shock Bazooka is just 2 white snakes in one, which is insane, for 1 Don. So this is quality card if you're playing Rainbow Luffy. And Karai Barry Island is a stage. It's not quite an event, but, you know, I'm not making a whole stage for a whole slide for this. This is just constant cycle if you're cross-skilled. So, obviously, you're not going to be playing Buggy, but if you're playing Rainbow Luffy, this is really good. This is genuinely really good to help you cycle through your deck. I'm not going to talk about Gum Gum Giant. We know this card's broken. We know this card is thoroughly broken. If you're playing Rainbow Luffy, or indeed, you could be playing a Straw Hat Crew leader that's not Rainbow Luffy. Maybe Zoro? Yeah, this card's cracked. Maybe this is a reason to play Zoro this set. That's something to think about, actually. On the generic side, we've got Get Lost. I actually think this is a little interesting for this format specifically, because it lets you KO for 3 Don any 2k or 4k blocker, which we went over on the previous slide. There's like 6 of them, and you can kill them all with Get Lost. Not bad, nothing too crazy, but I think it could be okay for closing out a game. I would forgive everyone who messes with my friends. I think it's pretty good. 2 Don to give minus 3000, let you swing into one of your opponent's dudes a lot easier. And it's hand neutral. I think this could see some play. It's not too crazy, but I wouldn't be surprised if you wanted to play this in your deck. Gum Gum Jump Rope is just a better version of Get Lost. It costs 2 and you do Don minus 2. You rest a 5 cost character, then draw a card. Hand neutral, you can rest any of these blockers except for Mihawk and Teach. Great card. Special Buggy Ball is a bit of a left field pick from me. I actually think this is going to be really strong in this format. 2 Don to basically return one of your opponent's characters to their hand is great. Like, your opponent in Constructed, you're playing a lot of things like Searchers, things like Sudus and Helmeppos in black decks. Little dudes that you get a bit of value out of their own play, and then they sort of just sit on the board and don't do a lot. Special Buggy Ball is obviously crap into cards like that. You play a Buggy Ball on me, I'm going to just pick up my Uta Searcher. I'm just going to pick up my Tsuru. It's rubbish. But in Sealed, people aren't playing 1 and 2 cost characters. They're just not doing it. So this is likely at least hitting a 3 cost. And 2 Don to bounce a 3 isn't bad. And in certain situations, this can be 2 Don to bounce a 4, a 5, or even a 6. I think this is genuinely quite a powerful card, and one you should keep on your radar. Gum Gum Lightning is 2 Don minus 2 to KO 6k. This is great. This KOs pretty much anything up to 5 cost that isn't a vanilla. Good card, really good card. Obviously very strong. Derashi is a maybe. If you get a lot of trigger cards in your packs, Derashi is really good. It's a draw 2. If you don't get a lot of trigger cards, this card's obviously useless. So this is one you're going to have to look at your pool of cards and assess whether this is good or not. Obviously good cards. Cards that we've already covered, I'm not putting on these last few slides because we've already talked about them. I'm not talking about them endlessly. So first up, Nico Robin. Your opponent has 3 more life cards, you trash one. It's great. It's a 6k body, got counter. The trigger's pretty garbage, but it is what it is. Trashing a life is nuts, and then you've got the 6k body to attack with. Good. Secret Luffy, you're probably not going to pull this, but if you do, we know how nuts this card is. Draws a card, rush, big dude, really good. You're always going to include this. Beckman is much the same. We know how good this card is. 7/7 with counter, gets rid of one of your opponent's dudes. 7k is the perfect number to swing. This is a quality card. If you pull this, you're going to include it. Sanji has exactly the same stats, but he just has a different effect. You do Dom minus 1, he gets rush, and then you rest a 6. This is sort of pretty similar to Beckman, right? You can then slam into the opponent's character, probably kill it, and then, or you can just go face, right? Sanji's great. I think Beckman might be slightly better, but rush in these formats, it can't be understated how insane rush can be. Your opponent's not expecting rush. If you can pull the Sanji out of nowhere, you're cooking. Yasop as well, going to 6k leader. We've gone over how many 6k vanillas there are in this set. Going to a 6k leader is going to be really important. because your lack of 2Ks, well, it doesn't matter because you can just counter 1s once you play Yasop. His Don X1 is also really good. If they've got 6k vanillas, you can swing 7 into 5 for 1 Don. Great, that's going down. Yasop, very efficient. All his effects are good. Good pre-release card. Good sealed card. And these two are insane if you're playing Rainbow Luffy. This Blackbeard not being able to code by effects isn't too big, but the power increase is wild. If you're countering a lot, if you've managed to find cards that mill, this is just ridiculous. This could get like ungodly big towards the end of a game. Big fan of Burgess. RDO is on play if your lead has the Odyssey type, you restand 3 Don, 6-9, you know, that's really good. And for the rest of the game, once you get him down, he gives you a 2k for 1 Don each turn. Really good for your card efficiency, really nice statted body. Restanding 3 Don lets you do something else with them, or just leave one up for his effect. Really good card in Rainbow Luffy format. Obviously, we're not playing Limb Leader, that leader sucks. Here's some of the more interesting picks that I've picked out. So we'll start in the left. We've got Shachi Penguin. This is when attacking, you give something -2. This can be pretty efficient for dealing with some of your opponent's threats. If they've got like 5k bodies or 6k bodies, put 1 Don on him, you're swinging 6 into 4, or no Dons, you're swinging 5 into 3. I think this is really efficient for battling for board. It's not too crazy. 4 Don is a little expensive for 5k power. But if you pull this, realistically, you're probably going to include it, because there's a lot of bulk that you can't. Bonk Punch. I don't think Monster's very good, but I do think Bonk Punch is worth mentioning. Like I've mentioned a couple of times already, in pre-release format, your opponent isn't really removing your guys with effects. There's a couple things in this set actually that can, such as the Gum Gum Lightning, but generally your opponent is not removing your dudes, and this is just an 8k swing when attacking, which is great, especially for dealing with those vanillas, right? They play out a vanilla, you play out a Bonk Punch, they swing with their vanilla, you put a Don on Bonk Punch and swing 8 into 6. It's just good. It's just a good effect. I wouldn't be surprised to see this actually do quite well in sealed. But yeah, I'd probably avoid the monster though. I don't think the monster's very good still. Kuzan I think is nice in slow decks. So if you're playing like a Bonnie leader, I think Kuzan's really good. There's not a lot of targets for him. But having your opponent trash 1 card from their hand, and especially if you can get rid of like a 3-cost vanilla, what was it, Pink Beard? This effect's really strong. 4-5 stats are fine, he has counter. I think you'll probably include this card anyway, because the upside of this effect is really good. In a slower deck like Bonnie. We've spoken about Katarina Devon, but I did want to put her here again, because Banish and Double Attack are really good. Although she should be over this side with the Lily Lock cards. I apologise for that. Doflamingo, we've also spoken about him. A blocker that can attack and restand, and the same with the Chopper, is just great. And Van Olga is also... He is leader locked, but he's also not, because the effect that I care about is on KO draw a card. This is a 5/6 that draws a card when it dies. It replaces itself in hand. Really good. You're probably not using this -3 cost effect anyway, because you're probably not KOing things with effects. The pre-release format is much more around battling than effects. So I don't think this is leader locked at all, really. Just a good statted body that draws a card when it dies. Good card. Brook is a 6/7 when he has counter. When attacking, you do Don -1, and you give 2 things -2. Like I say, pre-release is all about battling for board, and Brook is really good at battling for board. Obviously, it's got to stick around a turn. In pre-release, it's gonna, but it is a little bit slow, but it can make a pretty good comeback. This Sakazuki is a 6/7, no counter sadly, on play if you have 2 more rested characters. KO 5. It's one of the very few KO effects, and 6-cost KO 5 is good. You've got to meet that condition, but if you can get some real power out of Sakazuki. Odin is a 9/10 with double attack, and on KO you draw 2, trash 1. He's probably not getting KO'd ever, to be honest, so that effect's not going to come up that much. But a 9/10 with double attack is no joke. This can just cheese games sometimes, probably. I mean, they're not defending a 10 into 5, right? They're just not. If they've got a blocker, cool. But then you can use some of your effects to get rid of that blocker. Alvida, this is leader locked to cross guild. However, on KO, you can summon a 5-cost character other than Alvida from your hand. The card you summon doesn't have to be cross guild, doesn't have to be anything. It can be anything 5 or lower. which is great. It's a card that replaces itself on board when it dies, and it includes battle. It isn't KO'd by effects. If you're playing Rainbow Luffy Leader, this is probably one of the best cards in the format, because your opponent can't really deal with it, because they deal with it and something else comes out. So yeah, I think Alvida's really probably going to be quite slept on if you're playing Rainbow Luffy format. If you're playing normal, it's just a 5/6. So we've got Killer here. He's a 5/5 1k counter. On play, you do Dom -1. You reactivate your leader with Kid Pirates type. So if you're playing Rainbow Luffy, wonderful. And if you get a couple of these, this is probably a good reason to play Green Kid specifically. If you can, on a turn, I don't know, you put 2 Don on Kid, leader, you swing 7, your opponent responds to that, you play out this killer, you do Don -1, restand your leader, you do 7 again, then you use Kid's leader effect with your last 3 Don to restand him again. That's 3 swings of 7 just with your leader and 1 copy of Killer. I think this is one to really watch out for. I've not seen a lot of people talking about Killer, especially with Green Kid, right? Because it's a purple card. But in sealed, this is a real good combo to watch out for. So that was my guide to the OP09 pre-release tournament, or second anniversary pre-release tournament, whatever you want to call it. Hope you enjoyed me highlighting some of the cool combos you can pull off with leaders and cards in this set that you might not have thought about for standard constructed play. Let me know if there's any combos I missed. I want all the info I can get. I really want to win some of these leaders. These leaders look amazing. Good luck in your pre-release tournament. I hope you all win. Let me know how it goes in the comments, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.